Aloha Hawaii, I am Kimo Hussey, and it's my pleasure to be involved once again with another episode of the Ukulele Builders Workshop, brought to you in cooperation from the Ukulele Guild of Hawaii. This is a wonderful day to be talking about ukuleles, not only because of our special guest from Molokai, but also because that special guest, whose name is Dan Ryerson, and I just came from the ukulele picnic down at Kaka'ako Park. And so there were many, many people there, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful event to help nurture ukulele in Hawaii and actually around the world based on the number of people who were there. Our special guest today, this is Dan Ryerson, who lives on Molokai. Dan, in addition to being a very, very good friend, is also a very, very good luthier. I've known Dan for several years, and we thought it would provide for you a wonderful and a continuing episode of Ukulele Builders Workshop. So, Dan, wonder if you can start by giving us a little bit of biographical information.
Biographical, well, I started out far, far from Hawaii. I was born and brought up in the snowdrifts of Minnesota till about 10 years ago. And I really, other than a stint in Japan, I lived all my life there in the cold tundra. But, and I was a lawyer in Minnesota for 33 years until I realized that people actually like guitar makers, and so I started doing that.
Okay, good for you. Was it your interest in guitars or music or making ukuleles that brought you to Hawaii?
Well, when I came here first, I had been making guitars for a number of years. I had never made an ukulele. And I set up my shop, started making some guitars, and of course, it didn't take long before the ukulele burst upon me. How can you ignore it? And
yeah, right.
Yeah, I guess, as you know, I started to realize through players like you the great potential of this instrument. It wasn't long before I think local guys started coming to me and saying, "Hey, bro, I got this broken ukulele. Can you fix it?" Oh, try. So I did that a few times, and then I thought, well, hey, I can make one of these. So, and now it's.
And you moved directly to Molokai when you first got here?
Yes.
Oh, good for you. Well, how did that come about?
A string of accidents which started with some friends of ours who lived on Oahu, sailing around the islands, got wrecked in a storm and had to put in at Molokai. And after they'd been there for a week, they said, "We're not leaving, we're staying here." And so we started going out to visit them, and retirement age came around, and what better place?
One of the wonderful things about ukulele is despite the attachment ukulele has to Hawaii, nevertheless it is still a very international instrument. As we all know, the instrument first came to Hawaii in 1879 when the ship came to Hawaii from Madeira. Where that original ukulele came to, and they came from Portugal, but where the original ukulele came to Portugal from, we're not sure. But anyway, one of the international aspects of the ukulele is that this ukulele renaissance today is worldwide. And here, as we listen to Dan tell us about his history in moving to Hawaii and him being an attorney and have an interest in guitars and that at some point transitioned into making ukuleles, is another installment in a wonderful, wonderful genesis and evolvement of this instrument. Before we get too far away from Molokai, what I would like to do is maybe talk story a little bit more with you, Dan, about certain aspects of ukulele on Molokai. And the reason why we do this, Hawaii, is there's a lot more to making ukuleles than simply being concerned about the way it sounds, the way it looks, the way it is constructed, and all of the things that need to go into the construction. One of the wonderful, wonderful things about ukulele is its involvement in how it brings people together. So let's talk about Molokai for a little bit. And a few weeks ago, I was up visiting on Molokai and happened to be introduced to meet another friend of Dan's who lives very close to him. And basically, we went over to meet this person because of his interest as a botanist. And he has a specific interest in trees, especially with trees that after they're grown and harvested produce for us tone woods that luthiers like Dan use to make the instruments. So Dan, I wonder if we can start our discussion specifically today with basically you telling us a little bit about woods that are used to make the instruments, and especially maybe woods that come from Molokai.
Great, yeah. I guess one of the fun things for me about making ukuleles has been all the different woods I get to experiment with that guitar makers really never heard of. And maybe it's easier to do that because, you know, these smaller sizes, you don't have to have huge pieces of wood. Like the ukulele you just showed was, of course, it's a common koa wood, but it's not a lot of that on Molokai. We have a lot of nice stuff, though, like Milo and mango and kamani. Where I live is down close to the coast, and a lot of those trees grow down there. And so I guess, without making the whole list, over the last 10 years or so, I've probably worked with about a dozen different kinds of wood and experimenting with combinations and what sounds good, what's easy to work with.
And most of these woods from Molokai?
Yeah, not always
Some
koa.
yes, some
I
no.
guess I get a lot of koa from Big Island, but there's more of it down there. But Milo, I love Milo. I know a lot of other builders do, and we have that good supply. And you mentioned my neighbor and friend who's the botanist, and some years ago I got to know him, and part of his work is when trees come down and they call him to take the tree away. So I got him conditioned to never take away the wood before we look and see what's good in there, because you'd be surprised sometimes what a fallen down log will give you. And there's a lot of them that have ended up being beautiful ukuleles. And now that I think about it, this koa ukulele right here came out of a tree that blew down in the state park up topside Molokai about 6 years ago. Yeah.
So this koa is from Molokai?
People were asking me that earlier, and I wasn't sure. But now that I think about it, that is a Molokai piece of koa.
Yeah. Isn't that pretty? So when, if someone happens to see a tree that just recently fell, how does that person know whether or not the wood from that tree would make great instruments?
You can tell, of course, if the tree is heavily damaged. You want parts of the tree that don't have a lot of branches coming out, because that means knot holes. And of course, for instruments, we need nice, straight, clean grain. So if there's a straight section of the tree that's not split, damaged, has to be big enough, because keep in mind that the only wood we're using in instruments is off of the radius, so half the diameter of the tree. Yeah. So you need a tree at least, even for ukulele, 14, 16 inches at least, that wide to get your wood out of.
Big.
Yeah, because only half of it's going to cut.
Yeah.
And then you got to get the quarter sawed pieces. So one of the big drawbacks is in a tree, a lot of it goes to waste. You say, how do you know it's good? Well, a lot of times it isn't until you start cutting it up, slabbing it up, and you say, oh, that's nice.
Right.
But a lot of it, doesn't get used.
One of the things we would like to tell you about Hawaii is whenever you play an ukulele, any ukulele, that instrument has a wonderful, wonderful history. And one of the reasons why we start with wood is that is that the instrument that you play was in the making and has been in the making for decades and decades. One of the things Dan's friend mentioned when we visited him was he plants some of these trees, and I remember him saying that some of these trees, when they grow, are going to grow in his lifetime, and some are going to grow out of his lifetime. So the situation with us is that I think it's a wonderful thing for us to know the history and the evolvement of the ukuleles that we play and what it truly means to us when we do play. So let's Dan, let's talk about now the various parts of the instrument and what kinds of woods and different qualities of the wood you look for when you make certain instruments.
Okay.
Or when you make the ukulele.
Well, maybe a good example of that, first of all, is to start with the spruce top, which is characteristically a guitar wood, but more and more builders use it for ukulele because you can get a nice, as this one exhibits, really straight grain. And a quarter sawed, which means it's right out of the radius of the log, and a straight grain, if you look at the bottom of the end of the piece, is straight up and down. And then it's also straight this way. And why is that important? Because when you pluck the string, you're creating vibrations, and the vibrations are going up and down this piece of wood, and they have to transmit into nice, clean sound. So we do look for that. Even the koa, which has got a little more figure and curl in it, is still, you look for that straight grain. And then, if you notice, you can kind of see where both of these, they're book matched. This is one piece of wood which is sliced down the middle and literally folded out. And now you've got not only the straight grain, but uniformity and balance on each side, again, for sound.
Okay, so if the top is such a good wood for sound, why then is this part of the instrument and this part of the instrument different woods?
Well, you probably want a stronger wood on the body. The spruce is a softer, somewhat weaker wood. But the top is where 90 or more % of the sound is produced.
This is
the important baby here for sound.
Right.
The back and the sides have influence on sound. Really every part of the instrument does, but 90% more from the top.
Okay, so generally the other parts of the body, other than the top, are mostly for structural integrity, keep the instrument together.
And looks.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like this part here, and maybe this part here have different kinds of woods too. Can you tell me about those?
Sure. The dark wood on here is rosewood, which is not, of course, a Hawaiian wood, but a very traditional guitar wood. All the trim on here and the neck, however, are Hawaiian koa again.
Oh.
Yeah. And the bridge, rosewood, the fingerboard, African ebony, chosen by most luthiers just because it's hard and nice and smooth. Although, again, we have a local wood here, which would be wonderful fingerboard wood, is kiave.
No.
It's hard. Yeah.
Oh, let me tell you a little story about kiave. When we were visiting Dan's neighbor, you know what was wonderful about this? This person had such a passion for being a botanist and for plants and trees. That one of the reasons why Dan took me back there is that he showed us, those of you who are luthiers, he showed us a Cuban mahogany tree that he had planted, I don't know, I guess a few weeks or months ago, and he had Honduran mahogany, and he also was talking about maybe getting some seeds for Brazilian rosewood. Anyway, also at the time he had cut down a kiave tree in his yard, and so when he took us to take a look at the fallen tree, I said, "Hey, I know a person who lives on the Big Island. His name is Dave Gomes, who made a guitar out of chiavi. And several years ago, I had opportunity to play the guitar, and it sounded great. And so we started talking about using chiavi to make an ukulele, and part of the discussion was, well, maybe it would be a little bit difficult to bend the chiavi to make curves like this possible, but difficult. So then we started talking about other areas of the ukulele that maybe it would work to use chiavi. And so as a result of that, we talked about using that chiavi to make the ukulele fingerboard. So can you tell us just a little bit about that, and why that may or may not be a good idea?
Murder on your tools. It's got
So hard?
It's hard, and it has minerals in it, but that has never stopped anybody. And we are going to start using chiavi fingerboards. Yeah, you can bend it. You can build a guitar. You wouldn't put it on the top. It's too hard.
Right.
But the back sides in it, and it's a pretty wood. So.
Oh, it's a beautiful
Yeah.
wood. From what I remember, looking at the middle of this tree, it had some browns and reds in it. It was
reddish brown.
pretty wonderful. I would like, one of the things I'd like to relay to ukulele players is that my feeling is with regard to the fretboard on any ukulele, the harder the wood, the better that fretboard will respond to your playing. The reason why I like very, very hard woods on fretboards on the ukuleles that I play is that my left hand tells me that it makes the fretboard a lot smoother because the wood is so hard and dense. Okay, so we've talked about woods on Molokai. With regard to your instrument making on Molokai, tell us basically the process that you go through.
Well, of course, the wood we're talking about gets cut and recut until it's getting close to the workable size, and then it gets stacked away and cures for a long time. Air dries. You don't really want to rush that. Sometimes I'll get wood all cut, and it's going to sit around for at least 5 years before I think about using it. And then I'll move it into my humidity controlled room and let it adapt to that. And in about a month, then I'll start using it. And of course, the construction methods are different ones. I use what's called the Spanish method, which is the neck goes all the way into the body and the sides join into the neck. I see there are examples here of the blanks for Spanish necks, 2 of them there. You see where they're slotted, where the sides are going to join in there, as opposed to building the whole box first and then attaching the neck by bolts or dovetail or something. So I've always followed that because it was my background in classical guitar building, and a lot of those other ideas or techniques carried over into ukulele. I use a classical style tie bridge, for example. I like this classical style slotted head because it's lighter, for the player. There's not almost wood up there, but all this is a matter of
This one
taste.
has a slotted head also.
Right. It's a matter of taste, and there isn't. You can't say this is the right way and this is the wrong way to do it. It's what everybody likes, and you get something that is your style, your personality.
Sure. Okay, let's get in the more technical aspects of the work that you do, and let's start with this instrument. First of all, as I hold up these 2 instruments, you see that they're very different in size. So let's start with this one first.
Okay.
And have you tell us basically about this ukulele.
Well, of course, that's the tenor, 17-inch scale. It has a radiused fretboard, which means there's a curve built into the top of it. And that's a matter of comfort, really, for players. I find most players do like that. If you look on your electric guitars, you'll notice they're all slightly radiused and curved.
I want to say one thing before you go on. Sorry, that as a player, I really endorse radius fretboards because they make your left hand, the hand that you hold the chords on, much more comfortable. Sorry, go ahead.
And the other feature that is, again, totally optional is the cutaway. It so happened that the buyer of this ukulele requested the cutaway. And the purpose of that indentation out of the body is the player can reach higher, comfortably reach the notes.
When you're going down like this,
Exactly,
you mean?
Yeah. And again, you see that on a lot of guitars. Another thing I do, and more builders are starting to do it, is the side sound port. This, in addition to the sound hole, which is on the top. You have to have a hole. I know the sound will just stay in the box. But a lot of custom guitar makers a few years ago started discovering that a supplemental hole, and they put them different places, actually opens up the whole instrument sound more.
Does that mean that the size of this plus the size of this is what you do to help maximize the sound of the instrument?
Certainly there are theories and formulas about what the total area of open port relative to the amount of volume in the box ought to be. Frankly, I don't know what that is. My sound hole in top is always the same size on these tenors. And then I'm more concerned with the placement of this hole. And I found that the ukulele players like it right here because as they're holding and playing the instrument, they can hear what they're doing better. People who have been like in a combo or a Connie Capilla with 10 ukuleles going, they say, "Whoa, I can hear my own instrument now better."
Right.
It's some sound coming right up at you.
Let me endorse that as well for you, Hawaii, and that again is the sound hole here on this part of the instrument. Again, one of the things that Dan said is that from the players, when you're playing the instrument like this sound hole is right here and is right here, and for me anyway, it gives me a different perspective on the sound that the instrument is putting out, and it's a perspective that I like better. Before we get too far away from the sound hole, I want to go back to the cutaway just for a little bit. Other than being able to play up here, this part of the ukulele, is there any other practical or sound reason for the cutaway itself?
I'd have to say no. The luthiers have pretty much agreed that taking this little corner out does not detract from sound. But other than that, it is really strictly for reach.
Yeah. I, in terms of the design of your cutaway, I notice that this part here curves that way and it meets this part right here. I notice that on some other guitars, especially that rather than meet at a point like that, it's like rounded.
Right.
Is that just a design thing, whatever the maker prefers?
Just design preference. This is called a Florentine cutaway, where it meets, and of course then you put binding and whatever purfling lines have to agree with that. The other style is just you bend around an S curve, and that's called a Venetian cutaway. I just do this because I'm used to it.
Okay, so we talked about the top and how it needs to vibrate and how the rest of the ukulele provides structural integrity. It looks like one of the things that needs to be strong is this piece right here. Can you tell us about this?
Well, the bridge has to do the most important function. It transmits the string energy down into the wood of the top and sets it vibrating. And
vibrating inside the body? Or just the top vibrates?
Well, the top vibrates, but one of my original guitar building teachers and mentors said, think of the guitar, and the ukulele is the same thing. It's a box of air. And the top is like a bellows, vibrating. And what it's doing is pumping that air, which of course is transmitting the sound waves. So the better the energy with the vibrating string goes through this piece, a bridge, and into the top and distributes itself, the better sounding instrument you're going to have. And similarly, the saddle, which on these is bone. It's a hard, you want a hard substance that has to fit in there.
This white part right
Yeah,
here.
that's bone. There's other substances. Some people use the corian, which is the cabinet top material. You can get real fancy, and there are places where you can buy fossilized walrus ivory and make your bridge saddle out of it. But the main
But
thing
it just
is
needs to be hard.
hard and a good transmitter of sound. But you wouldn't want metal. You wouldn't want like a brass saddle, because you'd get a harsh sound too.
As an ukulele player, one of the things I'm always concerned about is how each of the four strings attaches to the bridge, because ukulele makers can attach it this way. Let me show you a kind of a horizontal presentation of this. Another way luthiers can do is to attach those strings using a peg, the kind that you just push into a hole. And another way that luthiers can do is to put four holes in it and make the knot inside of the body. So how do you decide how you're going to attach the strings here?
This is just a carryover from my classical guitar building. This is only 4 strings instead of 6. This is the typical classical guitar. We call it a tie bridge because the strings are tied around that block.
Cool. Okay, let's go from this end of the ukulele up to this end. Can you tell us a little bit about this bone? Is this bone also, this white part?
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us about that?
Well, the bone nut is, now you're getting further away from where, the sound is generated. But really, everything on here that a string touches is somehow contributing a little bit into that pool of sound. So you want a hard element here, like it is bone. But more important for this is where the strings are anchored for the top of the register. And you have to be very careful that the way they fit in these slots is not too tight or too sloppy, because you'll get buzzes or you'll get hard tuning. So each string being a different dimension, each slot in the nut is especially filed to fit in that string, and polished so the string will slide through it easy when you turn the tuners.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. For players, sometimes if you're playing your instrument and you get a characteristic buzz, one of the things you should take a look at is the string here where it lies into the groove, because if that groove is too big, too wide, it'll buzz. And then on the other hand, players, sometimes if you're trying to tune an ukulele and the tuner, you turn it and you turn it and you turn it and nothing happens, and then the next time you turn it, all of a sudden it changes a lot, it could possibly mean that the groove is too skinny and it's holding onto the strings. Okay, let's go further up from the nut here to the tuners, these guys. How do you decide what kind of tuners you're going to use?
Well, there's only a certain number of tuners made that will fit into a small slotted head. By slotted head, I mean where they're going in through horizontally.
Oh, going in this way.
Yeah, as opposed to the flatter head where there's a post that comes up here.
Right.
So there's not a large variety of slot head tuners available for small 4-string instrument. Somewhat limited by that. You can get them more or less expensive, but there's not a big choice. And I like the open gear tuner. Some of them you see the tuner has the gear is enclosed.
Oh, so this part right here is the enclosed part?
And I think the good point of that is it probably protects your gears from corrosion or collecting a lot of dirt over time. But the downside is that they're heavier. And I kind of made a policy some time ago, if I build a 6-string ukulele, I will not put closed head tuners on it, because the
It makes the head real heavy.
Yeah. So that again is just a matter of what I think is what the players have told me they like. They don't want to feel that they have to hold up this end of the ukulele.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the back. We've talked about the body. Let's talk a little bit about the neck from the standpoint of its shape. I personally prefer a shape like this where it's evenly rounded all the way down the neck. But can you tell us a little bit about different choices of design that the luthier has in shaping the neck?
There's basically 4. Like you mentioned, you like a round. This is actually more of an oval. They call this a Spanish oval. This is what you'd find mostly, again, on a classical guitar. A steel string guitar will often have a neck that's a little more triangular, especially older ones. And if you've ever played a banjo, you find that very triangular shaped neck. Part of that is because their fingerboard is narrower and they need, I think, a little extra strength. But they're also, it's customary, just the right feel for those players. Another one is you can be really round. You don't see that very often. And the 4th one is more the square-shouldered feel, where the neck is not quite as thick, but it comes out a little more and then squares off. Not 90 degrees, but the corners are round and then straight across.
Right.
And actually some players like that, some guitar players like that for one reason. It tends to discipline where their thumb is placed for their left-hand work. And especially in classical guitar playing, you might find that shape of neck because some players don't want their thumb wandering up and down around it. I think it's very uncommon to build them that way.
Okay, so we've pretty much gone around and over the uke. There's one important thing left that we need to talk about, and that is strings. Now, obviously, these strings aren't made of wood. So can you tell us a little bit about strings and what goes on in your mind when you decide what kind of strings you're going to put on the uke?
Okay, this of course is a high G, which means, you know, the 4th string here is an octave above.
It sounds like this.
The typical My Dog Has Fleas tuning. These are Aquila strings. I like the 2 things about them. They have a nice bright sound for a tenor, and they are, as I understand it from research other luthiers have done, they are a relatively soft pull. In other words, they're not a real high tension string.
Tension being the tension that the player feels when he's playing?
Well, certainly the feels. If you were to put a gauge on this, as some people have done and tested different strings, how much pull is there between here and here?
Right.
And there can be a considerable difference. A stronger pull might give you a brighter sound, a bigger sound, but I don't think it really necessarily does. And you're right, the player feels it. The more tension on the string, the harder it is to push down. And even that small distance, you know, if you're playing a 2-hour gig, you don't, you know, you'll feel that. Plus, it puts more strain on the instrument. And the ukulele woods in the top, even with the bracing, are very thin. And so the last thing you want to see over time is from string tension, your top starts to belly up back here, back of the bridge, and that changes your whole action.
Right.
So I like a lighter tension string that is still a nice bright sound. And for tenor ukulele tuning, there's a number of good choices, but
yeah. Okay. One other thing, and maybe we'll listen to this ukulele. I want to continue to talk about strings, and the reason why I positioned the ukulele this way for you, Hawaii, is if you take a look at where this string is, and take a look, if you can, at the distance between this string and each of the strings and the fretboard, that distance helps to determine what players refer to as action. With regard to action, what that means for players is how easily or how easy it is to play the instrument. Because sometimes when this action isn't right and maybe the string is too high, like this, it requires a lot of hand strength to hold chords in the ukulele, and at the same time, those chords turn out not sounding pretty good. So can you tell us a little bit about action and what you do as a luthier to maximize that?
Starting up at the nut end.
That's this guy right here.
Yeah, and where the strings are grooved into the nut, basically they should be laying down to where the bottom of the groove is the height of a fret.
Mm-hmm.
So that really your string is barely clearing the first fret. And some ukuleles are built with what they call a 0 fret, where instead of a nut, they just have like a loom here that the strings go through. The grooves just hold the string, and then they actually have a fret there. So you know your string is no higher than the fret. So that's as low as you can get up here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. As you come down this way, the strings do have to rise for clearance, because once the string is vibrating, it's making an arc.
It needs room to vibrate.
It's an arc. So what I shoot for, like on this tenor, measured at the halfway point, which is the 12th fret. The height of the bass string on this side would be, and is on this ukulele, 85 thousandths of an inch of clearance above the top of the 12th fret.
Is that like about?
Well, 85 thousandths is less than a tenth of an inch. And you mentioned how it feels to a player. If that was a 10 thousandths of an inch higher, if it was 95 thousandths, that is 1/4 the thickness of a dime. Your ukulele action would start to feel too high.
Oh, wow.
I think. Yeah.
Okay. Like Dan said, I'm going to move over here so I can, as I would love to give you an idea of how this instrument sounds. Again, this is a tenor uke. The back and sides, and the top are koa.
Right.
And the koa is from Molokai. In fact, most of the ukuleles is koa. And this is a high G instrument. This ukulele, because it comes from Molokai and made right, will also play pretty nifty chalang-a-lang music, like. So, a koa tenor uke made by Dan Ryerson with Molokai wood. Okay, tell us about this uke.
Okay, this is a baritone, the biggest of the ukulele family, and what sets it apart from the bigger body, is a 20-inch scale now, and it is tuned.
Scale is measured from what to
That's
whom?
the nut to the saddle. It's 20 inches. And the tuning on this is actually a guitar. So if you've ever played a 4-string tenor guitar, this is tuned exactly the same way. Or if you're a regular guitar, this is the top 4 strings of it.
Got it.
Yeah, so 2.5 steps lower than the tenor or concert or standard ukulele. But
and based on that, Hawaii, if you just listen to this, you notice that it has a very, very different tone. It sounds a lot more mellow. And the reason for that is the pitch of each string is much lower than a tenor ukulele. There you go, Dan.
And then in keeping with that, and what I said a minute ago about how I like softer strings, these are Savarez guitar strings. They're not ukulele strings. They are guitar strings, and so of course they're designed for this tuning.
Right.
But putting them on this shorter scale means you don't have to crank them up as high, and therefore they're even softer to play. Less stress, less finger wear. And the Savarez strings and some of the really good classical guitar strings you can use in this fashion, and they'll still give you really good sound. They're a nice sounding string. Again, this action is set down very similar to that. It's when I measure
Action is here.
the bass is 85 thousandths of an inch off of the 12th fret, and so it's probably about as low as you can go with this scale length.
Well, we're because you just mentioned the 12th fret. Can you tell us just a little bit about the 12th fret and what it means in like luthiery?
Well, of course, it's the 12th fret is halfway down the scale.
So half the distance between here and here is the 12th fret.
Right. So if you play a harmonic on the string where you force that high note out,
Like this, Hawaii. That's a harmonic. Do that again.
by touching the string at the 12th fret or right in the middle and playing that, what you've done is you've stopped the string from vibrating in one big arc and made it vibrate in two half arcs, which of course is exactly an octave higher than the string is tuned for.
Right.
And so that's why the 12th fret is important. There are also harmonics, as you know, at the 7th and 5th. But for tuning and adjusting purposes, the 12th fret has a lot of meaning, because if we're going to change the height of the action, we measure it there. And let's say it's too high. Let's say that instead of 85 thousandths here, I had 100 thousandths. And I want to take that 15 thousandths off.
Right.
So I'm going to come down, take the saddle out, and I'm going to carefully shave it down from the bottom 30 thousandths, because I'm going to get exactly half of that diminished distance here, halfway up the scale. Okay, and yeah, that's the the 12th fret. It's
Yeah, we talked about Hawaii. What happens when the string sits off the fretboard too high, because it makes it tough on action. Well, on the opposite end, if the string sits too low, then chances are you're going to get a buzz. Yes.
not only chances, you will.
You will get a buzz. Okay. If players experience a buzz, is there anything that they can do to try and troubleshoot that problem themselves, or is it best to take it to somebody to repair it?
You can start out troubleshooting it yourself. You mentioned the nut buzz. Like if there's a, if the nut is not only if it's too wide, but if it's cut too wrong so that the string is contacting the bone too far back in the slot, you get a buzz. Well, you can tell if it's a nut buzz simply by fretting a string, and if the buzz goes away, you're 99% certain that it's in there.
All right.
If it doesn't go away, then you got a worse problem. You got a bowed neck, or you got higher frets or something.
Well, then it's time to go to the repairman. Huh?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. You mentioned earlier the differences with the top, this being a spruce top,
Right.
And the sides and back being rosewood, as opposed to the tenor, which is all koa.
Right.
Did you choose the combination in this baritone, the combination of woods for the top and the back based on the fact that it was a baritone?
More based on the way it's braced inside.
What does that mean?
Well, okay, this combination of the rosewood and spruce is a very common guitar wood combo. And this has a uniquely different guitar type of bracing inside. And that means the underside of the top has to be strengthened. It is braced.
So that's on the opposite side of this, right?
Exactly.
Is the bracing.
Right.
Okay.
If you look inside the sound hole on your instrument, you can see the first brace called the lower harmonic strut going right across here. And then further back, there's going to be various styles of bracing. Fan bracing, what they call the kasha bracing that is more elaborate. There are X braces for instruments that like maybe have 8 strings or take more stress. This is a fan braced instrument that, because it uses what's a Robert Boucher bracing, which is right out of the classical guitar workbook, I stayed with a very guitar-like combination of wood just to see how it's going to work.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hawaii. Previously, we mentioned the side port. One of the things you can do if you play an ukulele with the side port. I'm not too sure our cameras can focus into this hole good enough for you to see the bracing. But if you have an ukulele that does have a side port, one of the things it'll do for you is to allow you to see inside of the ukulele and take a look at the bracing. And you know, in my mind, one of the most important reasons to do that is if you take a look at that, and as I take a look inside here and I see the bracing, you really appreciate the work that the luthier does, because it's busy in there, and you can see that there's a lot of fine work involved in doing that. Okay, so basically on the bridge on this ukulele, things that you keep in mind when you build are similar to the tenor ukulele?
Very much, yeah.
Okay, and same with the nut up here?
Same up there, yep.
Same with the headstock and tuners as well?
Yeah, this in fact has exactly the same head design and tuners.
Okay, got it. Okay, and again, Dan mentioned that you know, the back is rosewood. Can you tell us about this? I'll call it a stripe, and the workmanship that you see on the edge of the instrument itself. Is that when you do that kind of thing? Do you, as a maker, just exercise your own artistic creativity in doing that?
Well, in the choice of wood and how many stripes you want to add or glue on, but there's a real purpose for what is called binding. The binding strengthens the corners of the instrument enormously.
So binding refers to binding the top to the side?
No, the top and the sides and back are already all glued together, but they're just an overlapping box.
Okay.
And you know, there's some ukuleles that they're constructed that way. That's as far as they go. But if you look at the sides of the wood, and especially at the end of the wood, that grain would be vulnerable if you whack it, you know. But now you've by putting a strip of wood, or some you can use plastic, now you've got that longitudinal strip running around there, which is much tougher to any impact.
Right.
But to me, the most important feature of the binding is when you get on the end grain here, that strip that's placed across there seals the end grain. And I don't care how much varnish or shellac or anything you put on an instrument, moisture will penetrate into that wood, and it'll go into the end grain faster than any place else. And a lot of times that's why you'll see on unbound instruments the top separating from the body, especially after years when they've dried out or if they've taken any abuse. So this is, and of course we try to make it look nice. This is a curly koa which contrasts the wood and all that, but the purpose of this is strength and closing up that joint.
Yeah. Great. In a little bit, I'll play for you some on the baritone uke, but we want to continue to take advantage of Dan's expertise and what he knows and address something else. You previously talked about choices of woods. Is there such a thing with regard to back and sides that represents the favorite combination for Dan Ryerson?
Yeah, in the ukulele, because I've experimented with a dozen different kinds of wood, and I've put different combinations on, and I've to my ear, have heard some things that have pointed me down a particular path. And,
Right.
right now, the best sounding ukuleles that I have made, I think, have been koa back and sides and a red cedar top. Red cedar being a nice top tone wood used on guitars. And the combination of the koa red cedar to me has had a balance, projection, and a real sweet tone. Contrast, I've done Milo, which is a harder wood with a spruce top. And it hurts my ears. It's harsh. Don't do that. Mango is a softer wood, so if you put that on the back and sides, it seems to mellow out whatever you put on the top.
Right.
And so one of the nice sounds I got was mango and spruce. Yeah.
Mango and spruce. There you go.
Right. And then some things it's wait and see, because the consensus is that a spruce top will develop as it's played over months.
Mm-hmm.
Red cedar, what you hear right out of the gate is what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that somewhat true with ukuleles.
I know that Brazilian rosewood. This is not Brazilian rosewood, but it sort of it comes from the same family.
It's the same family.
Anyway, I've heard that Brazilian rosewood is one of the very best woods that a luthier can use to make a guitar. Is that the same thing with ukuleles?
Gosh, people have made Brazilian rosewood ukuleles, and the thing about that is there isn't much of it around. It's been a protected species for the last 20 years. And so the only Brazilian rosewood you can get are leftover stocks or some pieces that are very rarely certified by the Brazilian government as surplus. And consequently, it's horribly expensive. Mm-hmm. Frankly, if the player wants it, because it's a much more showy wood, it's beautiful wood, grain pattern on it. Acoustically, is it any different from Indian rosewood or cocobolo, which you can get? I don't think so.
If we put Brazilian rosewood up here and whatever kind of lesser wood here, what would be generally the difference in sound?
Never having had a piece of Brazilian rosewood to work with, I'm not sure. I've heard them, and I think that what you hear are some really fine instruments, because the people who are willing to spend $500 for a pair, this wood blanks, probably put a lot of care
just for a set,
a lot of care into making. That would be the best. That would be the really good stuff.
Yeah.
But I know, super custom guitar makers on the mainland who will pay for the blanks for a guitar $2,000 or $3,000. Because the customer wants it. And of course, when they build that, they put everything into it. So you're going to get a beautiful sound.
Okay, so the favorite Dan Ryerson combination is koa back and sides, red cedar,
Western red cedar.
Western red cedar on top. Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Okay, remember that Hawaii. Next time you wanna have a wonderful uke, or have Dan make a uke for you.
But that's all things being equal, because if I'm building
and it's tough
them,
to get all things equal.
Yeah, but if I build them and brace them the way I always do, my output has been that koa cedar. Somebody else might, engineer a totally different result.
Let's go to one other thing real quick, and that basically is the finish. Is it really difficult to get the wonderful finishes that we can see on both these ukes? While you're talking, I'll just move these around so people can see the finishes on them. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, finish is labor intensive, and for me, and I think other guys I know, it's the one part of the building process that we really hate. And this is sprayed nitrocellulose lacquer.
You hate it because it's so
labor
difficult?
Intensive.
Labor intensive.
Yeah.
That's a good reason to hate it, buddy. Howie, I want to tell you that one of the things I think personally makes these ukes so wonderful and makes high quality ukes so wonderful is that they have wonderful balance. If we were to take certain aspects of an ukulele, like the way it looks, the way it sounds, the way it plays, the construction of it, and if all of those things were balanced, let's say that we would have a nice perfect circle. But sometimes, you know, there's a possibility that we can come across ukes where one thing is very, very good, and maybe some other things about the uke is not so good, and so that uke doesn't necessarily stay in balance very long. We're getting to the end, so what I would like to do for you, Hawaii, is to say, first of all, thank you for being with us again. I'm going to play this baritone uke for you as a means of bringing our time together to an end. But before I do that, I wanna again say this is Dan Ryerson. Dan lives on the island of Molokai. Thank you so much, and let's see the difference between a baritone sound. First of all, you notice that the tuning again is very different. So let's think of something to play here. There we go.